We're now recording.
What?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Curt.
Good morning. And let's tee the coffee up. So,
How disappointing.
no, that we're going to just revisit it. So, we're trying a new software that creates meeting notes from the dialogue we're having. But apparently, it records its own thing, and we have to record the session separately. All right. So apparently that's what's going
on. It's only confusing to the human operators at the moment.
So anyway, we started out with Brad was explaining about his note cards. So start with your note cards again.
So I was cleaning up my area here, and I found these 1 year's supply of scorecards on 3x5 note cards that I was keeping my online telemedicine notes. And here's what one looks like, just a little card. It looks like a little golf card, and it motivates me to that's how I was motivating myself, is just keep little score. And it's like, that's 1 year, and I've been doing this for 7 years, right? So it's every day I just keep it, and it's mementos, and it's kind of entertaining because it's a form of art.
Yes, I would see it as such. Yes.
And so those evolved over time, and I chucked a bunch of them, but I still have some because they're a strange little memento, and I'm like, okay.
Sure.
The interesting function of it is the motivation changes based upon the method by which you keep score.
That's right.
And so I was telling Curt this just a minute ago, which is the self-reflective operation that occurs there. You're sitting in front of your computer talking to images that are people and interacting with them, and it's self-reflective operation. You reflect on your own behaviors, and your own behaviors are therefore refined over time. And that is an interesting observational effort. It's very Zen. I don't know. It's like meditative in its function, because you're not doing anything. You're just sitting there typing away. So I keep all my notes on spreadsheet now, just for the audience. But I have my motivation has changed, my psychology has changed, and my interaction with work is a little different, and it's interesting to participate in that. I sit down a lot. I practice sitting down and postural stuff. It's quite just ridiculous.
So you said that what you noticed before we got online here was how your thinking had changed because you were writing a book.
Oh, right. So I had cause. I was interacting on Twitter, and I needed to recall the name of a gentleman whose name I could not recall, but I know that I wrote it in a book, which I wrote some 6 or 7 years ago, which was a 200-page book, which is, I was trying to finish the book, and it was 200 pages long. I'm like, that's a decent sized book, but it's like, this book is crazy talk. It is crazy talk. And I recognize it as crazy talk, even if it's all correct. Because it's high, it goes to this in my understanding of the grammars and the logics involved in human expression have changed quite significantly. Because in the interim, I started working with you, Curt, and then in the last 2 years, and this is our 3rd year. Thank you. I'm going to raise a glass to that. That's good. It's like I see it as a column extending to the heavens, which is most inflated all the way down to the earth, to the center of the earth, in fact, which is most deflated.
That's correct.
And this book is 200 pages of highly inflated language about things that really occurred and are real, but they're up in the clouds, and you can't testify to that. It's conjectural, and it sounds like conspiracy talk, and so I was able to observe that and then understand the nature of the logics and the grammars, because in the intervening time period, my language and understanding and descriptive power have increased by orders of magnitude now because I understand the causality of the things that I'm talking about.
Yes.
Which is like that is the advantage that this science offers to people who are on the right track and don't know how to talk about it.
Right. Great. Absolutely.
It's like inarticulable truths. That's a problem because now you can't talk to someone else about it.
I wonder if I have somewhere in an archive my exchanges with Frank from the 90s, my friend Frank from the 90s, who's an engineer. He's a chemical engineer. He's an engineer back east. And he said, I understand. He said, this thing is, your insights are powerful, but your ability to describe them isn't.
Huh.
Right. And it was like, it's too hard to understand what you're saying. And so that's one of the motivators.
Huh.
So I tell people I'm trying to give people the tools with which to express what in my view was originally traditional Western thought or conservative thought in rational and scientific terms to compete with the pseudo-rational and pseudo-scientific terms of the left. Because they sound like they're more rational when they're actually just wrong, right? So, but the right sounded so morally bound that it was a question of right and wrong, not true and false. Where the left's possessive argument are a question of true and false and evil and not evil, right? Conspiratorial. So, or oppression narratives. And so these two things were converging at the same time. My desire to work on this and his feedback that I had to develop a way of communicating these ideas more correctly. And so, I mean, to some degree, like what's his name and I would talk about this back in the day, is that back in the early 2000s, is that I sort of feel like I've evolved. I mean, God put me on the planet to solve this one fucking problem because for some reason I'm wired for it, right? God knows why. But because I started out with, why are people so illogical? Right? I mean, why are people so illogical? And I need to understand them. Right? I start off from that precision. That's so funny.
It's just like this. Like, okay, I want to credit Curt here because Curt's genius is underappreciated by many. In fact, by most. In fact, so goes like this: I'm pondering this and I'm working on the Twitter and I'm like, okay, so I'm understanding the experimental nature of the Wild West that is the internet as it has been.
Yes.
And then I was pondering Curt's work and I'm like, well. And Curt is not a proper academic at all by any stretch of the imagination. And it's like they couldn't have you because Curt, first of all, you can't form a doctoral thesis group to get your doctoral thesis too. That's just the beginning of the problem. You're far too it's necessary to be so impolite that they would never allow you to do the research that you actually conducted.
Correct.
Because it's just too rude.
It's too rude. Social media is great because it turns out that that's an advantage because when you're provocative, you get testimony of a demonstrated bias and preference instead of pretense. And the academy produces the opposite. You get pretense instead of demonstrated bias and testimony in support of it. And I just like the idea that our academies do the opposite of what they need to do is just bizarre to me, in retrospect. But I didn't sort of look at it. I mean, I'm just like when I tell people I am so painfully logical, you can't admit it's It's painful, right? Because I really don't consider things other than this is just not logical. What do I need to do? It's just that stupidly simple, or this is too annoying because it's too illogical, right? Because it bothers me when things are illogical. So I just obsess about how do I fix this problem? Well, people have said this out is, I mean, there are not a small number of philosophers in history that when they're fairly young set out to achieve some big thing, right? And some of them pretty close. Like the one I try to think about is Bentham, because he says, I'm going to do what we have, which is codify the law. Of course, he's trying to codify the positive law, which is why his project failed. But in any event, so
It's a good go. Other than that,
but how many philosophers have done the same thing? I didn't do that. I just kept working on what wasn't logical until I was done. I mean, there's no.
That's funny. It's like this. It's like, and then you had to catalog all the lies.
It's just, and that was depressing.
Exhaustion of irrationality.
Right. Look, it's like when people accuse you of having some agenda. I really don't. My agenda is I don't like things that are false and illogical. Right? I just don't like them. They trouble me like an itch or a pain troubles you, right? And so I just can't stand it. It frustrates me. So to make the suffering go away, the pain go away, I just solve the fucking problem. But it's no like grand. You'd have to be insane, really, in my opinion, to try to do what I did.
Why, that's what I asked you the question. So why did you begin this project? No one in their right mind would begin this project, you said. It's too much work.
It's insane.
What's funny is, so my wife is like this. She's like, she refers to the fact that I said you did research to discover the answers, right? And she wants to see the research, like it's going to look like a paper or something. I'm like, that's not happening.
Well, the problem. Here's a great example of what people misunderstand about science. Just as there's like problem theory test, right? And then there's, ideation, hypothesis, theory, settled theory, law, right? And then that process works over and repeats again, right? Continuous process of refinement. Now, the problem is making observations. In other words, the reason we have empiricism is because the mind is frail, right? And we are highly biased. So the reason you use what we call empiricism is you make measurements and observations is to overcome your biases, right? But then there's a second process with which you take the measurements and you have to use logic to explain the causality of the measurements. So there's two phases, right? So how do you do research on history, right? How do you do research on behavior? So in some sense, when people say stuff like that she's saying, they're saying one thing that's silly, another thing that's contrary to all the evidence. The silly thing is that the sciences are that regular that you can perform consistent tests against them because they don't fucking change. Whereas human behavior is continually self-modifying. So what you have to do is figure out what you have to do with huge sample sets.
Yes.
Right, which I use language, right? Language, cognitive science, economic records, and legal records and historical records, right? So I use all those record sets. But what you're trying to find? You're trying to find the correlations between these things. But then only an idiot would say those things are mathematically reducible. They're not. They are at a macro level if you do it sort of like Turchin does.
Yes.
Right. But it's actually that's actually measuring capital changes, right? So that you're going to get a civilizational change, right? So that's what he can do. But the problem is when you get down to our level, like the individual and the behavior of individuals in aggregate across cultures, you're trying to get down to the behavioral level, not the expressed behavioral level, right? The causal behavioral level, not the. So in essence, what I'm saying is Turchin's work is correlative,
Yeah.
right? But from which he has to deduce causality. My work is correlative, but it has to be ordinal rather than cardinal. Equilibrial, right? Rather than cardinal. So to say that I don't do research is to not watch what I do. I mean, you've seen what I do, right? I mean, I basically run experiments.
It's fascinating.
Right. And so what I do is I get experiments, and then I try to say, given what I know about cognitive science and what I know about the words said, what is the logical relationship? And the two just come together until they're the same thing. Right. I mean, language is just pathfinding through an episode in order to transfer the idea. So that the idea that it's not the same thing as any other science is a misunderstanding of the difference with the physical cardinal sciences, right? And which is force equilibration, and the behavioral sciences, which is cooperative or neural economy and cooperative equilibration.
Right.
And so when people say that to me, I'm like, the level of understanding you would need to understand what I just said is beyond my ability or willingness to try to teach you, because they don't even have the concepts necessary to understand the difference between the cardinal and consistent, deterministic, and the ordinal and ordinal, reciprocal, equilibrating, and evolutionary. So they can't understand those two differences. And so what we've tried to do here is, by putting out trifunctionalism, is to show that relationship, and between trifunctionalism, and to show the grammars as the unification of the sciences.
Yes.
Now you could understand what I just said, can't you?
Sounded like English to me.
You're right, because you understand it, right? But how long did it take? Now people wonder why.
I'm still
people
working.
wonder why I can't explain it to them. It's because you don't have the basic conceptual tools for me to discuss it with you. I mean, I can't communicate with you because it's like talking to a 5-year-old about life experience. It just can't do it. So
in fact, it's simply rude.
It's
the 5-year-old can't imagine it.
No, it's unimaginable. So to me, it's just, well, in retrospect, and to you too, because you just did it with your. I imagine this thing up into infinity in the sky and something down to the earth, and that's inflationary language and that's deflationary language, right? Which is really right. But when we say sciences, what's the difference? It's just the complexity, right? I mean, the difference is that physical permutation, like what the physical world can do to recombine, is less than what the biological world can do to recombine. It was less than what we'll just skip all the steps, right? We're going to biological. We're going to go from the very simple first things all the way to cognition, right? All the way to advanced life. And then what the cognitive world is able to do, and then what's the cognitive world has language and mathematics and procedure and logics and all this other stuff, right? And then we develop all the sciences as domains of measurement. I mean, that thing goes way up. Now all of a sudden you've got that goes way up, right? That lesson of grammars. All of a sudden now start lying about this shit. Right?
Right. That's like the technology on top, right? Which is to say, that which is described and is not true, which is the cloud is not a bunny.
Yeah.
Right? You say the cloud's a bunny. It's not a bunny. It's just a cloud. It looks like a bunny, but it doesn't even really look like a bunny.
Yeah, and then we get the.
So in fact, there's a page in my book that has a picture of a bunny for this very purpose. Because is it a bunny? Is it a cloud? And it's like we're describing things in these ethereal terms, and I can easily see. You could look at my manuscript and go, "That's just lies." If you prefer not to believe it, they would say it's lies, and that will be an accusation that it may be true, it may not be true. You can't tell. It's indeterminate because it's not causally defined.
Yep.
So
you brought up at the academy, you couldn't do this in the academy.
No, you. It's like this. I'm talking on the Twitter thing, and I'm like just trying not to get in trouble and trying to do something useful and support the people that need support and be appropriate with them. And anyway, I'm like this. I'm like, I thought about you, Curt, and I said, Curt, it says it's not just that you can't organize the doctoral committee for your dissertation, but you're just simply not going to be allowed to be as rude as is necessary for you to be to get the job done.
Right.
So that they can't solve the problem. It's not like it's like they prefer not to solve the problem even, because they prefer not to be rude enough to find the answers that are necessary to solve the problem of the behavioral sciences in the context of science.
Correct. The problem with the academy is they have customers. They're trying to develop justification of the good. Right. So they have, right. And the second problem is they're not trying to defend the civilization. They're not trying to produce elites to persist the civilization. And lastly, the worst part is that they're, instead of working for the common good, they're working for individual attention, reward.
Yes.
So the academy has stopped being a priesthood.
No. Right? Yeah.
And which is a secular priesthood for doing the same attempted good as the priesthood, right? They are producing the opposite, which is a selfish, seditious, undermining society for individual attention. They flipped the academy's purpose on its head. And so, it's like, furthermore, how many professors could I talk to would understand what I said? I mean, I can think of a few, but I probably know them all. In other words, I probably, of all the people I can talk to, I probably know their names. Maybe it's that few people. So how am I going to get that, right? And how am I going to go and get a project that takes 30 years, right? It takes 30 years of work to come to the end. Now, they would say publish along the way, but they don't. Yes. People don't think what happens is when you publish, you not only anchor the public, you anchor yourself.
Yes.
Right. So I just don't think like that. I just think of, am I done yet? Yeah, we're done, right? I mean, it's kind of weird going over with you and the guys, because I have the guys all week and then you on the weekends, and we're working on sort of two different things. You and I are working on the first principles, and they and I are working on the law, but for no other reason than I probably can't do first principle with anybody other than you, because we're the people that did it together, right? I mean, so I go through this, and it doesn't matter. We still find things that require clarification. Like this, I was surprised what Martin came up with yesterday. Was like, wow, that really helps a lot. I mean, the past couple of days, really. So, and when you and I go over stuff, we discover holes all the time, right? Because you're always saying, but what about, oh, what about this and whatever. And you're spending less time saying, stop being angry. I mean, I haven't noticed you telling me to.
You're not angry, man.
To not be angry anymore.
Which is interesting. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I attribute between you and my therapist and my friends. I'm kind of under assault from all sides, so it's kind of worked. The most support advice you gave me was just to stop participating in negative people. Just stay away from them. That really is the answer, because you can't fix people that broken, and it's like for when I go to a poor country, I can't stand it. Because I look at the poverty and I look at how systems are working, and I realize what's broken, and I want to fix it. And I can't enjoy myself. I can't go on a vacation place like that where everybody else goes, oh, it's cheap. And I'm like, everything's fucking broken. And I sit there and obsess about how to fix it. It doesn't make me happy. It makes me exasperated. So anyway, I don't know. It's not so, I mean, and it's really different now from the 80s.
Wait. And the sad part of that story is that increasingly this country and civilization is becoming like that.
Correct.
That's sad.
It's because the abandonment of responsibility as a virtue signal. Because responsibility requires policing yourself and others. And if we like a virtue signal being amoral or immoral, then I've created incentives for self-destruction, which is what's happened. So anyway,
difficult to watch.
So you can't do this stuff in the academy, and I think one of the things we touched on in our a few minutes before we started recording is that the academy actually produces the opposite effect, right? Is that what you talked about being rude, right? And most of what I do is rude, right? I mean, it has to be, because I'm trying to get past reported into demonstrated behavior, right? I want to know what people actually intuit, feel, believe enough that they will engage in what they consider altruistic punishment or retaliation, right? So what you do is you provoke people's intuitions, and then you study how they lie. I mean, it's not, we call it King of the Hill games, right? That's what we do, right? We call it anarchy. So, and Facebook is a bigger audience than Twitter, and we had long form. So, I mean, it was like an art form on Facebook, right? I would just start some fucking argument, and the best kind, it's like the best comedy, right? Is when you can't tell which position I hold. In other words, I make it ambiguous enough that I can make the argument either way, and I get everybody pissed off. Because then you basically set the mouse maze for the mice to eat each other, right? And you just record the oh, that was
rude. I've been talking about the Norwegian rat experiments from the 50s. That B.F. Skinner and his boys were doing. It's rude. So you throw the rat in the pond until he drowns, and you time how long it took him to drown. Then you rescue him right before he would have drowned, and then dry him off, and then throw him back in, and he lives a long time because he keeps on. And then you let him drown again, because you're just testing how long after you charge him up that he might get rescued with hope. And it's that rude,
right? It's really awful. But so Pete, this is why I have such what's his name? Will talk to me, Thomas. He's a Mises guy, Tom. That should not. It's embarrassing that his name has disappeared when I know him personally. But he said, I just don't want to talk to Doolittle because I don't like the way he carries himself. Well, the way I carry myself, like if you know me in person, I'm actually kind of nice guy, right? I mean,
you're the most gregarious,
right? And so, but when I am online and I'm working, I'm not that person, right? I'm working, right? I'm not self-expressing. I'm working. And so he says, I don't want to talk to that guy Doolittle because he doesn't want to carry himself. And I'm like, well, the reason you can't get the right answer is because the way you carry yourself when you're doing research. Well, it's the same thing, the problem in the academy, right? I mean, a lot of this stuff is crap, right? Especially the behavioral sciences. Why? Because it's conducted on college students in small sets, doing things that are set that by definition will confirm the bias structured into the original argument, original test. Right. And I'm like, that doesn't tell you anything because everybody's just going to virtue signal. Right. But the problem is they don't want you to run tests on people that are mean. You end up with Kaczynski's, right? Because that's what happened to him, right? So you don't want to run.
No, go ahead, please.
That's what happened to Ted Kaczynski. They ran negative tests on him, and it really hurt him. So and he was a fragile character to begin with. So not that he was wrong in his
analysis was
correct. But so the point I was trying to get is that you can't run negative tests like I do on people because nobody would show.
Oh yeah.
And so what I viewed as the revolution that social media provided me was an infinite pool, because it's
volunteers
of free research on volunteers. I could literally run tests for months. I would just take these arguments, right? And I would because you can't focus them because people get what you're doing. So what you do instead is you stagger all these different arguments, right? Until you realize, and so what you look for is an opportunity in the news or something that has people thinking about it, you interject a king of the hill game into that moves one of your research questions forward, right? And so all you do that. And so you keep 20, 30, 100, it's probably not 100 at one time. I'm probably thinking about a dozen, right? So you're moving about a dozen questions forward, and then you just ask it from every fucking possible angle with every possible suggestion, and hopefully you can get the people to fight. At which point, now you're just saying, which kind of arguments are they using? Now, I knew that there was difference between masculine and feminine, but it wasn't until you and I got working together that I was like, holy shit, it's a one-to-one correspondence between empathizing and social lying, and systematizing and intellectual lying. And I was like, that was one of the things we did together. And I'm like, so you learn, the more you run these tests, it's like some people say we've had Newtonian gravity is false. It wasn't false at level of precision. He was observing it.
Right.
It's false at the greater level of precision necessary for greater scale. Well, it's the same thing for most of the stuff I work on. Like we had a thing where we clarified something in reciprocity last week. And it should, I'm like, why did we not see that? Well, it's because we never got to the granularity where we were trying to deal with the baiting into hazard problem. Right? I mean, back in the day, but I was working on that. But now that we're trying to get down it, we all have it in our heads, right? And so it's like gravity, is that the general ideas keep getting more precise over time. But it's because we just run millions of these fucking tests, right? On every goddamn circumstance. And the more of us that are doing it, the better it gets. So and then then I have excuse me, last thing. Then I have to go and I get somebody like you who's willing to work with me. Thank you. I love you. Thank you so much. Everybody appreciates what you've done. Is that I get to work with you, and because you and I get to work a lot, the guys say, hey, that works. I'm going to work with Curt a lot, right? And so what happens is that now when I have to explain it to you, I have to make the argument, educate, whatever. You force me to articulate, not at the level of resolution I see things, which is kind of
right. You argue too much.
To say, okay, how do I make this addressable for people? All right, and you and I work on that until I get better at it. So I mean, it's not like it's more. People think, well, it's like they're working with some permutation on a carbon bond with something, right? I mean, you can work with this for quite a while. But the number of dimensions of causality that can be affected are still limited. But for us, the number of dimensions of lying are holy fucking shit. I mean, there's a lot of them, right? Or when you add ignorance, error, bias, deceit, wishful thinking.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's pretty hard to do what we do. But what they don't see is we have these checklists. Just like scientists have their checklists. Is it right? Is it consistent over time? Is this the measurement return? Well, we're doing it. The difference is our measurements are ordinal, not cardinal. Or it's categorical and ordinal, right? We're trying to say reciprocity consists of these properties, and these properties appear in these ordinal spectra. And if we measure this thing and it's within limits, then it's reciprocal. If it's outside this limits, it's irreciprocal. If it's irreciprocal outside this limit, what is the incentive what is the incentive in this context that breaks the limit? And then we work up from there. Now, Martin is so bad. He said, Martin just assumes everybody's always lying. And he says
he's mostly right.
And I'm such a good Christian, Catholic, Protestant boy, right? That to me, I'm like, look for the good in everyone, so I don't do that. Right? But he just assumes everybody's always lying. And unfortunately, it's true. The problem is the difference between the bot lying and the person who's intentionally lying. I mean, some people are lying just because that's the convention that they learned that
they don't know they're lying.
They don't know they're lying.
Now, that's the thing is now I'm going to talk about this inflationary speech, and most people are operating with inflated logics and grammars. In fact, almost all.
A lot, both. You're correct. I just want to add conflated and onflated because it's like my favorite ones are faith, belief, and confidence. Those are three very different terms that we use that have absolutely different meanings, right? So we do, or it's logical, where they could be using rational, a reasonable, rational, and logical, which are three different things. Right.
Right.
And just like they said, that's the science. Is that the hypothesis? Is that the theory? Is that the settled science, or is that the law? Right. People use these terms. What they're really doing is saying, well, conflation, right? Conflation, right? And then you say inflation, which is when you do the same thing. So somebody says that's not logical. Well, that's a higher standard than reasonable. What you mean is it's not reasonable, right? And I said, however, it is reasonable, right? It's just not logical. And what's the difference between those things? How much knowledge you have, right? And so some have faith in something. Well, I have faith in God, right? Right? It doesn't, right? I don't actually believe in God. I have faith in God, right? I don't have confidence in God. I don't have faith in God. I believe in God. I have faith in God. Why? Because that's all I need, right? I don't need more than that, right? So somebody who says I believe in God, well, what does that mean? It means I've got a rational justification for it. And what is right? What do I have scientific confidence in? Well, you can't have scientific confidence in it. We can't, right? So you have conflation and inflation working together to basically add obfuscation and the pretense of knowledge, right? That's what you're doing. People are doing.
Wait, they don't know they're doing that.
They don't know they're doing it. They're pretending they have knowledge by some vague association, when it's not. It's just the best tool. It's like the best kindergarten tools they have for discussing the problem.
Right. So here's the issue: is the 5-year-old is operating with this highly inflated logics and grammars.
Yes. Yes.
Can't imagine that you're not operating with the same tools at their disposal.
Right. Now, thank you. Can I kiss you for that one?
Of course.
Now we get to the next step is, what if your brain is organized to predict emotions instead of outcomes? What are you going to do? If you can't imagine it and you predict emotions instead of outcomes, what are you going to do?
I'm going to make arcs that generate emotional outcomes among the audience.
Right. You're going to project. Right. You're going to project emotions onto an audience.
Right, because why would you say that?
Well, otherwise, right?
You must be evil.
So, 1 second, I gotta do my nose here.
Yes, sir. So the I'm thinking of the angry boys who are operating with an inflated set of logics and grammars.
Yeah.
They're gonna make a lightning arc to the ground based upon what they believe, the projections that they believe are correct.
Correct.
And so their angry boys are going to make lightning strikes because they can't gracefully come to terms with what's really happening, because they don't have the tools at their disposal, because they haven't done the work necessary to understand what's really happening.
Yes.
They have the stuff that's happening at this level is correct, but it filters through the column of logics and grammars to the ground.
Yep.
And that's what's necessary to be able to process the information that way. It makes it so you don't have to arc. You're able to operate at the basement level and work.
It gives them the feeling they have the ability to act. So we should give them credit.
Yes.
What it does is they want to act, and it gives them the ability to act. Right. In other words, this is important. This is why I love them, even though they make me exasperated.
Yes.
I love them because their intuition and moral ambition is correct.
Yes.
You just don't know how.
Right. The frustration is what makes the heat.
Right. And so what we want, what we have so far not been successful in doing, is figuring out how to teach enough of those people what's wrong with how they're thinking, so that they can think correctly in order to work toward the end. Like, I had another example of a guy contacted me last night, said, I followed you, but when you talked to the BLM, I'm like, you guys just didn't understand that at all. Right? Did the BLM guys hate us? No. I didn't, because you know why? They're not the enemy. They're the
That's
false
correct.
flag of the enemy, right?
They're
They're the
just foot soldiers that are being abused by lies.
those people are, to tell those people they aren't screwed is false. They are. Right now, they blame it just like our guys do. How did you describe it? The lightning, they go to the wrong solution because that's all they know how to do, right?
It's like the lightning goes to the high point.
Right.
It doesn't think of too much. It just goes to the nearest dischargeable potential.
Right, exactly. And which is okay, right? The problem is it's going to the because the right is more distributed, right? The male mind is more distributed. They are more confident or arrogant about their rightness, right? They're less agreeable. Whereas the left is more agreeable. So they're less confident about their individual rightness and more confident about the group's rightness.
Yes.
So from us, I'm like, look, we didn't even get negative press. The other side's got negative press. We didn't get negative press. So now who got suppressed? I didn't get suppressed. We didn't get suppressed by the left, the mainstream. The right did. And so it's one of those things is I don't want to be right when it means everybody else was wrong. Right. So when I said all the whole point is they only have one tactic, is to bait the right into the hazard
Yes.
of defense, at which point they cast the right as the aggressor and then use the armed forces of the state to defeat them. And so I'll tell you, Gandhi knew what he was doing, right? Right. And we're just using law instead of Gandhi. Right. We're saying attack the state, not the soldiers. Right. Right. The soldiers don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're just doing what they know, just like our guys know what they do. So I said, just don't do that. I made it about the government, right? And the financial sector and the media and the academy, right? They're the evil people, which is Turchin's overproduction of parasitic elites. But
There you have it.
So when you get all caught up in Antifa and BLM, you're doing exactly what they want. The left is hanging out the bait to bait you into aggression, which they will then blame on you, defense, which is really, it's just defense. They're baiting you into defending yourself. At which point, they can justify by narrative construction the use of the state to oppress you, which is what they had. The January 6th is a beautiful example.
Oh my! It's like it doesn't take much for them to generate a narrative.
So the problem what I have is the way you solve this problem is on the right is an intellectual and operational pragmatic solution, not an emotionally fulfilling one. Does that make sense?
And that's disturbing to the young
and the guys can't
agitated mind, right?
The guys can't handle it.
The issue is
it's so pent up. This is what John said. John said they're so angry we'll never reach them. In other words, we can't get to or what I said in response was, no, they have to completely fail before the solution is possible. They have to give up on their illusions that their Christian nationalism or their fascism or their white supremacy can win, right? They have to give up on those three tactics and just go for what the country was founded on, which is morality, natural law, which is moral action, truth and duty. And say, once we do that, the enemy can't do what it does. So it's like in war, you defeat, you destroy the enemy's oil fields and you burn their crops. You don't fight the fucking foot soldiers, especially when they outnumber you. I mean, it's just stupid, right? I mean,
that's right.
I can't even comprehend it. How you could be that dumb. You know what it is? They're just so mad. They want to express it in their own toddler fashion. And they've been infantilized by 2 generations or 3 generations of women now, to the point where they think that's okay. They're not men yet. They're still boys, and it's frustrating. So it's not that we don't know how to win. We know how to win. I know how to win. The only reason I went out as the front man is because John couldn't afford to do it because our guys weren't put enough money in to make it possible for him to afford to do it. He's a guy that you want as your politician. I'm the prime minister, right? Or not even that. The guy who runs the cabinet back in the head. I'm just the motherfucker that gets shit going in the right direction, right? He was the guy. Well, the problem is we don't have another politician of his. I don't find anybody of his moral fiber, understanding of people, and ability to communicate. And you just can't find. These guys don't go on trees. And the problem is, and you've got to get somebody who's early enough in his growth that he hasn't been captured by one of the parties. And so, because those people, honestly, they're good people. They tend to be very bright. People who work in politics just aren't that bright generally, which is frustrating. So we need somebody like that. That's a moral person presenting a moral front that allows us to take forward the natural law as a not only legal and political, but a spiritual movement.
Yeah.
And I'm not that guy, and I don't want to be that guy. I mean, I don't. I'm too old for it, right? And I don't have a temperament for it. I'm a CEO, not a priest, right? So we need that person, and if we can get that person, we're better off. And I'm never going to ask him if he sort of walked back up and said it's time. Of course, I do it, but this is a person I love deeply. Right, very deeply, and I would never ask him to put himself and his family in that position involved. That's beyond.
Yeah, it's an unaskable question.
It's an unaskable question. So, but you see, it's my point here is that I love our rad boys, bad boys, broken boys, whatever they are. I mean, I love them like a father loves his children, his sons, right? I absolutely do. I know that they're wrong. I know that their complaint is morally justified, but it's like the kids want to rebel against dad and whatever, and so I can't organize them. You need a priesthood to do that. And it's one thing John was good is he would take one idea of mine and he would make it in, crayon letter. He would write it in big bold crayons with music and video, and that would work. And it was clearly working extraordinarily successfully. But it became very clear to the three of us, me, him, and Brandon, because that's who really did the thinking on this, was that Trump was going to lose the election. It became clear to us by the spring that Trump would lose the election, and so we figured we have only so much time to try to create a voice, because what would happen after the election is what I said would happen is they would move from to active suppression, and they'd organize the state once it comes out of power. And so they've done exactly what I predicted they do, because they're fucking predictable. So anyway, how did I get all the way over there? Sorry. I took my allergy meds an hour ago, and they're not seeming to go all the way yet. Anyway, so what does all this mean? Did I ask you this? I asked the guys, have we reached peak woke?
I think we may have, because it's like that. There's a significant reverberation which I'm picking up on, and I can't tell. It's like the failure of the Bud Light, and the rebuking of that marketing attempt is peak. It's peaked. That peaked. The same thing is occurring. The Navy is doing some marketing thing that's just peaked out too, and it's like revolting to the veterans. And it's like, so it's like, it looks like the peak, the high water mark. And it's like, because it's revolting. And it's generally recognized as such by the population, and it is demonstrable in their behavior, which is you change their way the beer they drink. That's no small thing, right? It's demonstrated interest.
Well, I mean, you've turned the brand into the equivalent of you've turned a brand from a symbol, right, into its opposite. But basically,
right, so the polarity shifted on it.
It's absolutely the worst. I mean, it's worse than Coke, right? New Coke that's a forgivable mistake for being stupid, right?
Just an error. That qualifies as just a mere error.
So Anheuser-Busch, again, which is a company I know quite a bit about because my uncle was a senior person there, is that first of all, it's hard to imagine how that fucking happened, right? But I'll tell you how. You understand how the business works, right? So if I'm a chief marketing officer at a company that's big, right, and you divide the labor, like they have Bush Entertainment and Bush Beer. I mean, I don't know. I can't recite them off the top of my head because I don't follow closely.
Right.
But I know about entertainment, and I know about the beer products, and so you have people that do that. Now, those marketers in turn have marketing departments who do research, right? And then those marketers at that level, they hire agencies to own the brand for that some domain like Europe or China, whatever. So you hire out, just like you'd hire local guys to install radiator HVAC units, right? I mean, it's that level. And then those guys hire agencies. Now, agencies are always small, almost all, what I mean is the creative agency, right? So how the industry works is you can only the way you make money as a creative guy is actually down here until it's like the drug dealer hire. There's a big similarity between drug dealing and advertising.
Yeah.
The people there's so many people who want the business, they work for peanuts, right? And then a few people bubble up and they become creatives, and then they get paid some money. But the big money is when the big accounts, you can move up here, right? So it's a little bit like the drug dealing business, where the people at the bottom, the dealers, actually don't make any money, right? So what happened in this case, Anheuser-Busch and the people, who's a Belgian company, that's the people who hired they won't tell who the agency is. You know why? They'd be out of business.
They'll destroy them.
It's going to leak eventually who the agency is, because somebody's going to say, right? But I guarantee you, everybody at that agency worked on that line. They're fucking deleting their files. They're removed. They're just saying, I wasn't there. I wasn't working at that time. So, yet there's a group in that agency says, there was a cool idea. Those fuckers didn't understand. We were trying to reach the heartbeat of the young people So if you talk to a pretty good marketer, the way they have it is they have there's actually apps that do it. Like there's apps for everything, right? I mean, the marketing business, because it's really shit rolls downhill, right? I mean, you have somebody. I have a 3:30 to 4 p.m. pickup. Okay, I'm okay. So shit rolls downhill. So these decisions about that ad are made by people who are quite far removed from the people who own the brand.
Yeah.
Right. So they probably had no idea, because this is just like a stupid idea, right? I mean, do you know how many stupid commercials get made, right? You never see, or are shown to a market that you don't understand. There's a big difference, like between what the ad you show in Germany and the ad the ad you show in America, right there. They're completely different businesses from that standpoint. So obviously, whoever made that ad, right, was just a young, social media aware person. And what's their job? How do I get eyeballs?
They got them.
They get eyeballs, right? They got eyeballs.
They got the eyeballs.
Yeah. The problem is you want eyeballs that don't fucking hate you. Now there's some truth.
Well, it's like it's plus minus, right? They got the minus.
Well, there is some truth to all advertising is good advertising. This is true.
We'll see how that plays out.
Well,
So it's like it's this polarity shift. It's like this polarity shift. So the academies went away because the academies used to be church oriented.
yes.
Then they changed polarity to secular, and now they've gone sour
Yes.
because the incentives got all lined up backwards.
Yes.
And it's like the same thing happened here. It's this the polarity was the opposite of what they thought it was. Because they're operating with the playbook.
Yeah, you're giving away. This is the thing is, this is why I object to CEOs being responsible for everything. Is because you can't.
Right.
There's no way any CEO understood what this would do. If he asked you or me, we would say, fuck, that would be catastrophic. Right? But the CEO doesn't know because you're in all these markets, right? Whose job
wait. Let's I wanted to talk about the corporation as an agent. Okay. And it is, you're telling me that the chief executive officer, he's responsible, even if he's unconscious of it.
Correct.
So he has a tort responsibility.
No, I'm not disagreeing that. What I mean is that there are things that it's reasonable for you to be responsible for.
That's right.
One of them actually is that, and we've people like me have argued about this for decades, is that if a company showed its brand market value on its balance sheet the way it does its goodwill, you have a lot more accurate understanding of the balance sheets of companies, right? And measuring it used to be hard, now it's easy. But we know the brand value of Bud Light. Is it Bud Light? What was just?
It was Bud Light.
Bud Light, right? Because it's quantifiable. This costs 30% of sales, right? Which is a lot, right? Right. All right. And it's among the people who, it's like anything else. The people who are affected like that are the people who are going to remember it. Now, the reality is that did the CEO, even the chief marketing officer, approve this ad? No, because they have a thing called brand guidelines. But you know how you know when you break a rule is when you did, right? But so out there, you're the marketers, you're creative directors, which are really fun. I mean, honestly, if I could live with and work with anybody, that's the people I would work with, right? Because it's so fun, right? And I get to do my thing, right? On these fun topics instead of these fucking evil topics, right? I mean, it's right. So, I have friends, and especially they have a agency in Oregon. It's a small agency, right? They're friends. I would love to be one of them, right? Is because what they do is absolutely joyous way to live, right? You're not going to become a billionaire or anything, but it's a really fun way to live, right? But your job is to say what's getting people's attention.
That's right.
Keep a portfolio of what currently grasps attention, and stuff falls in and out of this, like fashion, right? And so these guys are really good at that. So if there's something that's arisen that gets attention, or they have an idea that they can get more attention, that's what they build. So that's the frame of reference they work from. So the problem is you need to have somebody who sits back and says, do you understand who our customers are? Because our customers, right? The second thing is this wasn't like a mass release. This is like
because what it did was it was a little signal that went viral.
Right. So they just sent out cans to, I think it was influencers. I'm not sure who it was. Right. It was custom cans. The custom can company says, we have no fucking idea, right? We don't
care.
We print the thing, and please don't take us down, because they're saying, look, we don't know this stuff, right? We just fill customer orders and we do quality for our customers. If our customer wants to do something suicidal, we don't actually get to say. We may not even know it's suicididal, right? So
Can't
please
tell.
don't take us
That's
now.
outside the scope of our
Right.
operational limit.
They're basically like a fulfillment vendor, right? You order something. It's like when you order these cups, right? You can't
Yeah.
order this quality cup anymore, by the way, because the companies that made this quality cup have gone out of business during the last recession. But if you want to do that, they just make it for you. They don't, if you send them this graphic, where's my fucking screen? You send them the graphic, they're going to put it on there. Well, so apparently that's all it was. Yeah, that's all it was. It's like you get the vendor, and so they're sending this out to a small group of people, whatever. But holy fuck. So
they used it and it went viral.
Right. Now there's two ways to look at this, right? There's the
Okay.
short term, which is that as a CEO, you want to make sure that you haven't damaged your brand, because a lot of what I gotta understand, a lot of advertising is research and development. You don't know. That's why so much of it fails. Is because you just don't fucking know.
Right.
No way to. That's why advertising is so expensive. Is because it's costly to get into, and it's probability is
high risk.
Right. What I say, it's basically gambling. So sales is not, marketing is a little bit, and advertising is gambling, right? And so when you look at these guys, like they just tried a little fucking experiment to get attention among people who are in the segment called influencers that are definitely part of the demographic who would be aware of this current trend, right? So
Right.
it's not illogical in the sense that you're this little creative agency somewhere trying to reach out to this market with what, because you're aware of what's grabbing eyeballs. The problem is the chain of responsibility to the brand, the defense of the brand, is too many steps. And so what happened was this fucking thing turned into a nuclear bomb for the brand. Now I'll tell you the opposite. When was the last time you or I thought about Bud Light?
We're in agreement. I
Right?
understand your point. And it's like, you don't want this kind of attention, man. Because it's like now when I think of Bud Light, it makes me laugh because
Right.
it's a laughing stock.
But the truth is the sales are already recovering.
Really?
Yeah. So so this is how it works. It's not clear, and it's not going to be clear for a while,
Right.
if this incredibly bad advertising had a negative effect. It may have actually had a positive effect.
We'll see.
Right.
We'll
So
see.
no, that's why when people say, when I look at these, it's like, what I say this all the time. It's like, if you understand businesses, and of course I'm in the business of analyzing, decomposing businesses, right? So that's what I did most of my life. So I mean, in that process, because that's what you're really doing with computers, right? Is you're analyzing processes and trying to codify them, right? So the problem is, marketing and advertising are a real pain in the ass for exactly this reason, because it's actually I mean, if you are an international brand with that much reach and that many customers and that many markets, your chances of fucking up are actually pretty high. It's amazing. Like you look at Pepsi and Coca-Cola, they're conservative companies, right? They are always in the pop phase, but they're actually in there. They know exactly what they're trying to make you feel, which is a little bit, they want to make you feel at a party. That's what they're trying to do. You're at a party. This is your little bit of joy. This is satisfaction for you. It's not like Starbucks, which is like, this is your little blessing. This is your little bit of private thing, right? So they know what they're doing, right? And then you have the other ones I tease about all the time, which is Travelocity, or I can't remember which one it was. And they're like trying to say, no, they always use happy, nice faces. We're the people who are on travel who are nice to you. I mean, it's you can't really, if you understand how these marketing systems works, it's childlike levels of sophistication that are with darts thrown at them from 10,000 different angles, right? And if you do something as stupid as this one, which was take a redneck beer and put a drag, what the fuck is wrong with you? I mean, wrong fucking answer.
Okay.
But in the sense of, anyway, why did Curt just go through that? Curt does that because he thought it was a teaching moment for the owners, right? Understand
Also,
how.
what's interesting is this you see the question was, is it as it hit the high water mark, the woke.
That's right. And so I wanted to explain how it's very, when corporations do stupid things, it's usually not because the people at the top thought something stupid.
Right.
It's because somebody who wasn't at the top.
Right. So it's like, but this indicates that inside that hierarchical structure, that the woke was unstable.
Yes.
And caused damage and harm, because it's like the woke rose too far.
Yeah.
Transgressed. So it's like that's a high watermark. It's like you don't let the woke one get in there that has the right credentials, because it's not intelligent enough to operate here. It's Peter principle writ large. So it's like that's a sign of the transgression has been maximized. Because you can't, you turn the gain up, you're going to increase this error margins. Right now, I see signals coming from the my feeds that are talking about identifying all the corporations that are contributing to the enemy actions, the enemy pawns.
Right. So again, imagining myself as I'm the CEO, right? I got a board. I got to. Most of what you think about in that role is money, right?
Yeah.
Because money's scarce. You're trying to produce returns on money. Now, what is let me look this up. What is there Bush on net profit 2022? It's $6 billion, but doesn't tell me what the profit margin is. What margin? 10%. Okay. What's the rate of inflation last year?
It's gotta be.
It's very close to 10%.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So how much money did they really make last year?
They're skating along.
They're skating along. All right. So meanwhile, if somebody like in my business sector, you're trying to aim for 15%, 14%, right? Right. Services business. And the bigger the services business, the harder that number is to reach. Right? But I grow my company. My goal with the company is to double it every year, every 2 years.
Right.
Which means I'll run it at 9 to 11%. All right. Now, how much money am I making? Well, I'm making capital at exit.
Yeah.
When I sell the business, because 6x or whatever. As the acquiring company knows that you can run it at 15%, right? So it's just 15% times 6, whatever that is, and you're going to get at least that much for the business, unless it's strategic, in which is what I tend to sell to. It's more. So the problem is that if you run at 3% inflation, and you run at 9% profit, that means you've made 6% profit. Well, what the fuck is that? That's not much. What happens if you have a bad year?
Right.
Right. So what you do is you keep a credit line to tolerate that.
Right.
That variation. Just like you at home would keep credit cards or a home or what do you call it, a home mortgage
equity.
Credit.
Yeah.
Or you would keep God forbid savings for that purpose, which is to some years you're going to go down and some years you're going to go up. Most of us prefer to take advantage of inflation and pay home equity lines, drawdowns, and then our house appreciation generally, because inflation compensates for it. So the problem is that most people think these CEOs are just like roll. It's like, what is that Scrooge McDuck,
Yeah, yeah.
right, or Richie Rich, and it's just not like that. I mean, you actually think pretty hard about how to make sure you make a dollar, because you have investors, employees, right, ideas, markets, everything, everything's fighting for some piece of that 10%, and you're trying to get that 10% of, up enough that your investors prefer to invest in you, so you weren't paying the interest cost of borrowing money to keep this fucking place going. Because that's really what you're doing, right? You want stock market investors to buy your stock, right? And to change your borrowing capacity so you don't pay high interest rates, so that instead of making 10%, you make 12%. I mean, it's really that stupid, right? I mean,
Right.
and the public thinks these guys are like the people who run these companies are like omniscient Darth Vader strategists when they're just not. It's more like you got a bunch of kids. You imagine you have a dozen kids across all these ages, and you have a fixed income coming in and all your kids want shit. It's just like that, except the difference is that your kids are unlikely to get to the point where they're going to starve and die. The company is very likely to get to the point where it's going to starve and die. And so everyone looks at, I'm going to look at Tesla, or I'm going to look at Apple, or Microsoft. This is like talking about like the very tail, right?
Yes.
When
Yeah.
where's Burger King closes like on average 200 or 300 stores a year, and they're going to close 400 this year. Right? There's always rotation, right? Right. So they don't say how many they're opening.
Right.
Right. So you close stores, you open stores, right? They had one franchise you go business with a bankrupt recently with like 120 or 110 or 120 Burger Kings, right? So I mean, of their yearly allotment of stores that are going to go under, that's a lot, right? I mean,
Right.
so it's like the same thing with. So if you understand how businesses operate,
Yeah.
it's not so much conspiracy, it's more like idiocy,
Okay.
right? Because the people who do these stupid things, there are Enrons, of course, right? There are Enrons.
Right.
All right. But if you look at like the 2008 financial crisis,
Okay.
Those people were just stupid, right? Mostly, right? They're just stupid because they didn't really. It's like if you could fool Alan Greenspan, who's not an idiot, I promise, right? Right? He actually didn't see it coming. You have to be an Austrian to see it coming, right? Because that's how we think about the world, as misinformation, right? Bad information travel. So they feel. So the problem is politicians. They're just like everyone else. They're over business, which is staying elected. They have customers, which are donors, right? They have constituents, which are not donors, but they're like the minority shareholders.
Oh yeah.
Right. They could be, so the difference is they're donors that are investors, right? And which have a lot of say, but in the end, you got to get the votes from the shareholders. Right. So, and if you meet these politicians, they're not very smart. I mean, I don't like Mitch McConnell, but he's not stupid. What's her name? The woman there.
Einstein.
Well, that one.
Pelosi.
She's not smart. She's cunning.
Yes.
Right. And so, you meet the kind of people who run for Congress, like the House of Representatives. They're ordinary people who've had enough success in life that they want to achieve a higher level of fulfillment and claim Maslow pyramid. Right. They're good people, most of them, right? But they're way over their fucking heads when they get to that stage of shit, right? They get in there and it's like, holy fuck, the game is rigged.
Huh. Now the question is this: what are you going to do about it?
Well, I mean, it's the argument is that what's the real problem in each case I've given is the organization size is too large.
Scale, yeah.
The scale is too large for the system of information necessary to guarantee integrity. What happens with scale is rent seeking begins to take over positive incentives. So the one things I noticed at Microsoft in particular, more so than every other company, which isn't the same, it's probably way worse now, which is that you have a 20% increase in employee load. In other words, you have enough job for a quarter or a half a person, so you hire a person, but then their job expands to fill
Right.
all available.
They'll do something.
Right, and most of it's not useful. Actually, and then what happens is those people try to get legitimacy by doing something good, which is actually imposing costs upon the people who are doing something good. So, I mean, there's all sorts of calcifying processes that form in large organizations. So, the company that got this right originally was people who do Velcro, which is they broke everything up into small parts, and small parts tend to work very well, which is the same reason I'm always advocating for nation states, which is small parts. Right.
There you go.
Sorry, I just got another alert that they're picking me up at 4:15, so I have plenty of time. I'm gonna go get in trouble tonight with a bunch of conservatives.
Excellent.
Okay. So this has been, I did not think we would have this conversation. How the hell did this conversation start? So what have we tried to do? We tried to explain in the first part that that we can love the Lost Boys, but there's a reason why they fail. And that it's very hard to solve that problem. Because their disagreeableness, which makes them intolerant of this negative structure that's being imposed upon them in the economy.
Yep.
Right, they're right about that, right?
Yep.
They're right, but because how did you describe them as lightning bolts? They go to the easiest, the shortest path.
The shortest path. It's just electricity. They're just going to arc to the place that is the most opposite polarity.
Right. So that's what they're going to do what they understand. The problem is they don't understand enough to do what's going to win. Right. Is right.
Right. So their premature action will lead to failure.
Right. They're just taking the bait every fucking time. And what does the left do? They do one thing. They bait into hazard. And they bait their own subjects into the hazard of their leadership. And then they use their subjects to bait our people into defense of this our history and our Western way of life and our responsibility.
That's right.
And they say, wait a minute, you're preventing me from getting responsibility for merit rather than you on the left are all obtaining merit by attention seeking instead of anything constructive. And so they're upset about it. And they're trying to defend against it. It's completely irrational. But the problem is because they're disagreeable, they won't learn how to win. And so we can't teach them because they think they're right. In other words, part of the thing that
they think they know the right answer.
They think they know the right answer, which is the wrong answer. So because it's what they feel, because
it's their bias,
right.
That is the problem.
Right. So, and then at the second arc, we try to explain that, well, the kind of decision making that's going into a company like Anheuser-Busch or any other company, because of the scale of it, is an information problem for the same reason, but for the opposite reason. Whereas they might know the right thing, there's too much incentive for disinformation in the complexity organization versus, in other words, the incentives aren't aligned all the way down because a creative person's incentives may be different from the brand's mission, right, of the customers. Whereas, in other words, why customers actually buy the brand.
It's an alignment issue.
Right. So in both cases, we have an alignment issue.
Right.
So we have the people who are too overconfident. I mean, in both cases, it's overconfidence. But the lower case, it's a failure of individual knowledge because of failure of our ability to produce a system of knowledge into which all these groups can organize. And in the corporate side, at the large scale, it's the knowledge exists, but there's a failure of communication to maintain the limits of the knowledge that's established. So it's like you could fail from both directions to make.
That's right.
Yeah, I put it that way. So you're thinking.
Yeah, it's command control issue in the corporation.
Well, I mean, it's just,
So it's too much levity, too much levity or freedom of operation of the employees in the corporation caused the error.
right. So how we produce the tests of truth, reciprocity, demonstrated interest, trifunctional states, right? Sex and cognition. Well, the law does that too, which is where I got it from. Right. What are the sufficient criteria in order to make a decision on this particular issue? The same thing is for brand identities, right? Is that either you can articulate what you're doing in enough detail that can be memorized, or you can't. And my favorite insight of the book Good to Great, which came out, I don't know, 2001 or something, which had a big effect on me, was how the importance of making that message understood by every single person in the business, so that every single decision in the business by even the lowest level person rolled up to a test of this criteria.
Oh, it's alignment is
right. Alignment is it. So what you want to do is have continuous alignment across the decision structure.
Yes.
So the companies that are most successful tend to do this successfully, right? The companies that are least successful don't. So when you look at my businesses, when I say I run them like a grad school program, there's a reason. The reason I do that is so that I get alignment across the largest number of people with the least distortion by the management hierarchy. That's where it comes from, right? And so that's why I run them like that, which is why I spend so much time with the biggest management team I can possibly handle, right? Because even if those people fail to climb the tree, they're in. It's like a religion. I mean,
yes.
Except that the real answer is, what's the checklist? I mean, what's the Our Father and the Apostles' Creed?
Right.
Checklist.
Yes.
So
it's all about this. Is interesting because it's like there's a parallel process. There's confidence and there's alignment.
Correct.
And you have to be confident to act, and you have to act within alignment.
Correct.
So that gives you the triangulation to give you the point of operation.
So the problem is, because the feminine converges and the masculine stays between the libertarian and the authoritarian, the feminine goes through the communist, right? Because of that, the male spectrum is always fragmented. So what's a problem for the male spectrum is we may have alignment against something, but we don't have alignment towards something.
Yes.
Right. And so this should tell us something, is the alignment is against something. Against something is the law. It's a via negativa law. It doesn't matter how we organize, as long
there
as
you go. There you go. I like that. So it's like this. Okay. I'm gonna repeat that just because it's that good. Via negativa is the alignment of the law. We're all a little bit against the left for our own different reasons on the right. Yes. We all have our own reason for it, and they're not the same.
I think we're all against. I would say
I apologize for finishing my statement here, which is it goes the same as the column of logics and reasons and logics and grammars, yes. Which is that if you look at the spectrum of the right with their divisions, it's the same as the column of the logics and grammars. Parallel that process.
Right.
And the issue is that when we identify the via negativa, which is we're all talking about the law from different perspectives.
I'm going to say it differently because you people will misinterpret you. The law doesn't care about what to do. It cares about prohibiting what the enemy does, right? What the libertarian to authoritarian spectrum does is care about how we do it. And so there's a difference between what I perceive as unity and criticism of the left, but disunity in the action taken to correct it. Whereas the only means of unifying the right is not by what to do, but it's what to prohibit. So the law is the only means of unification across these spectrums. Because once we are unified in the law, right, we can have anywhere on that spectrum. It doesn't make a difference.
That's anywhere on that spectrum is okay.
That's a preference. And what that really is a class structure. Right? It doesn't make any difference. You know, the middle class at the top and military class at the bottom, and in the middle is what you'd consider the managerial class.
I like that.
So that's
been my work is I'm trying to work on alignment. Oh, so reduce the separations that divide the right to cause them to be lined up together in their opposition to the left so that we can work together. But
the problem is they're so angry that they reach for, I want libertarianism now. I want what's the not ethno-national, civic nationalism. I want ethno-nationalism. I want fascism. Right? Monarchies in there somewhere. Right? Monarchies. Monarchy. I want fascism. So there's that spectrum. Well, that's just what you understand, because it's probably a reflection of class structure. Class structure versus disagreeableness, right? So you're probably in there, and there's probably an IQ factor in there because libertarians said to be pretty smart. So just, there's something there. It's in there. Authoritarian is very simple, very clear. Monarchies, a little bit of trust. Democracy under rule of law is more trust. Civic, in other words, ethno-democracy. So, civic nationalism is a lot more trust, and libertarian is an insane amount of trust. It's an unreasonable amount of trust, right? So this whole thing is based on your trust. So just map out your trust, your class, your intelligence, and you're probably going to wind up with and your degree of disagreeableness, which of course is going to be the authoritarian side. And you've probably got your personality mapped to what kind of political structure you prefer. And it might only just be political structure you prefer because that's what makes sense to you, because of your personality traits, because of the experiences you have, or because your class, right? Or just maybe it's all you know. You know, I mean, it's clear to me that the optimum is rule of law in an ethno-national state, right? Or at least ethno-national possession of the government, the institutions of cultural production. But that's clear to me that that's what's obvious. I mean, having quarters, basically, having subgroups inside your polity, as long as they have no access to political power, doesn't do much, because you can always get rid of them if they cause too much of a problem. So anyway, you know, that's a pretty broad spectrum, and bringing that into alignment on other than we can do it our own way is almost impossible, which is why I'm so strong on saying we need a lot of states so that people can have the states they want. The market will resolve it. You know how it's going to market to? It's going to resolve to small, ethnically homogenous nation states on rule of law, and it's probably going to have some sort of democracy and some sort of participation, because it's the best way to throw the bums out, even if it's a useless way of determining policy. So I mean, let them market. What I'm saying is, I don't want to tell the right what's right, because I can't claim to know. Maybe that, because there are times when military rule has to take place, fascism, and there are times when there's a windfall, which is libertarians. Right. And you want to just move the scale according to what you have. But some of us prefer a different baseline. Like, I want to be around my fellow Scandinavian or Germanic people who have this really high trust, really low impulse, right? Really Christian gregarious look at the world, right? I want to be around that, but we can't be around it if we're surrounded by people who don't share the same, because 10% of a population that's hostile to that high trust will actually destroy the trust. It doesn't take a large number. It takes 6, 8, 10%. That's what's happening, right?
Yes.
So anyway, so I mean, I might prefer that, but it doesn't mean I think if you're I'm going to pick a smart community like the Ghanaians, right? Right, Ghana or Nigerians. And if you look at them, I mean, those people are pretty impressive, but is that mean that the impulsive nature of the demographic is still equal to the impulsive nature of the Northern European? No, it's not. They're just smart, but their impulses are going to be different.
Yes.
Right, and so their stuff's going to be different. So that means we can cooperate like hell. Then we can, because you look at the Nigerians who come here, and they're one of them are more successful minorities. So, because of course that they've been indoctrinated into Western capitalism longer than the rest of Africa, so they're just naturally wired for it now. So you take a high IQ population, you give them capitalism. What's the difference? Well, they're still more extroverted, and they're still more impulsive, right? But that's not exactly a bad thing, right?
Right.
But you can't. It's the denial of these differences and the aggregates of the populations that make a difference. It's like black on white crime is crazy, right? The Hispanics are less, right? But white on Hispanic is higher than white on black, right? So why is that happening? It's happening because we're closer,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's more opportunity for conflict because of the amount of change, because these people are still adapting to living here. A lot. The point is that it's very hard to try to do what we're trying to do once the institutions have been captured, right? And once the institutions have been captured, we need to produce unity by the only means it can produce unity, which is the only means that the American founding fathers created unity among those disparate states, which is the only reason the Germanic Holy Roman Empire created unity across so many different states with so many different subraces and some cultures with so many different subraces, is that you do it by law. In other words, you do by prohibition on what's bad. Therefore, everybody chooses what goods are best for them within their ethnographic system, which is precisely what people need. And trying to force people who have different historical, organizational, cultural traditions, and they have different biological distributions, especially cognitive and emotional distributions. Try to force them in the same polity is what creates friction. Proximity creates hostility. Whereas, I mean, that's why I always say, is like, nobody beat me up for this, but I mean, I have no problem. Trading with Israel turns out to be a good thing. It's like trading with the Netherlands, right? I mean, it's a very high quality population in a very small space. It has every incentive to cooperate, right? And that's great. But having those same people in your country undermining you to try to produce the civilization they prefer is suicidally destructive, especially when they're good at it.
Right.
Especially when we're the most open society, so the most fragile.
Right. All right.
Well, I came to this meeting this morning really excited about the progress I had made with the guys on the law. I mean, I really am really excited. It's amazing. And I was really excited at my last few discussions on the pamphlet, which was basically the same process, right?
Yes.
And so I came like, I'm so excited to work on this. Yeah, we hit these interesting topics, which they're meaningful for bringing about the change, revolution we want, right? Or what I would call it is, I'm not calling it a resolution, it's called a restoration, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Or reform. The restorations or reforms we're going to bring about. because it's actually the core problem. The core problem is how much more difficult it is to organize the spectrum of the right from the lack of the spectrum on the left.
Yes.
Because what we are doing is asking for responsibility with different degrees of certainty, right? Between libertarian and authoritarian. It's like we're taking total fucking responsibility versus I'm going to take responsibility for me, you take responsibility for you, right? As long as we're all responsible, fine. Of course, which is my fucking stupid intuition myself, right? That's where I'm, but I have to fight my own libertarian intuition. And say the way we ameliorate that is with the law, right? That's a hard spectrum to solve because eachbody's trying to get a different goal in order to solve the problem. The problem is solved by the law, right? Which is the problem is the most intellectual thing.
Yes.
It's the least emotional, most intellectual thing you do. All it requires to impose that law is that regardless of what outcome we want, needs we want, we all equally demand the law so we can produce the polities we want regardless of what everybody else wants, right? Because some of us are going to want to have libertarian policies and those will fail. And some of us will want classical liberal policies, and they'll succeed. Some of us also want authoritarian policies, and they'll succeed, but they'll sacrifice growth for it.
Right.
And so, okay, that we don't have to have the same via positiva system of government. We only need the same via negativa system of justice, which prevents us all from doing harm to one another, but lets us organize our polities according to our wants and needs. We'll get Sparta and Rome and Athens. We'll get the spectrum, Sparta, Rome, and Athens out of it, right? We'll get that.
Yeah.
Which is what we used to have in Germany, France, and England, right? We had Sparta, Germany, France, Rome, and England, Athens. We had those three for those exact same reasons. If I warned you out, is that what that face?
No, it's very good. I'm just writing it down. I'm making notes.
All right, so I came to this meeting thinking, let's work on those things, and now I've used our 2 hours, and I'm like, okay, well, at least we have tomorrow. But
tomorrow, that'll be good.
And then tomorrow I'll come here with all these ideas from a conversation this evening. God knows what that'll turn out to be. We'll see what that happens. All right, let's have these interesting conversations because I haven't talked to these guys now. And the last one was before Christmas, and I was too sick to go, and they were not happy with me.
Ah, right.
So I probably got to hit a liquor store and bring some. I'm gonna bring some wine.
There you go.
All right, love
Very
you.
good.
Did we do okay today?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I enjoyed it.
All right, love you, man. Thank you very much.
All right. Wait, let me talk to you after we get done.
Okay. Everybody, subscribe. Is it like? It's
subscribe,
bell,
notifications.
Leave comments, and I really like your comments. It doesn't matter what they are. Just say something that mattered. It makes me happy, full of joy. It makes the work worthwhile. Anyway, thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.